In this demo, we are going to use MongoDB driver or the native MongoDB driver to connect to the database using Node.js. So we are going to try to perform the most common operations, such as how to perform query on database, how to insert, update, delete documents into database or into a collection. So we will try to just like make things easy to show how things are going. Since like most of the time you are not going to go to let's say work with MongoDB driver because there are better alternatives, as we will see in let's say in a coming demo, right? So now let's go to our command line. Here I will try to just like increase the size. So I'm using git bash command line, so I would go with to C, then users, then desktop. So in here I will start a new project for npm. So I will do npm or let's say make dir first. Let's call it native MongoDB. Then I will just create and just like enter to this directory. So I would go with native MongoDB. Oops, MongoDB. Now, since we are here, let's initialize a new Node.js. So let's go with npm init. So let's just like set everything to default for now. Yes. Then from here we can just like do npm install MongoDB. So this is just like the steps that we are going to create, right? So since it's already installed now, we have no problem. So let's start our Visual Code and let's open folder, the one that we created now. So let's go to desktop. It should be in here, select folder. So what I'm going to do is just like, as I said, I create it's called index of CRUD. It's called CRUD.js, which is create, read, update, and delete JS. So the first thing that we should do is to import the library that we are going to use, which is native MongoDB, right? So to do that, let's go with const. Then we can go with MongoDB client, which is going to be our handler here. Then we'll go to require. Here should be MongoDB. Then from here we can just like do initialization for our client, which is the one that's going to perform the whole thing, right? So let's go with Mongo client here. Okay, so another thing which is really important, and we already discussed through demo 1, which was how to make a connection to your let's say your MongoDB, right? So if you recall, we did something like let URL equal MongoDB localhost. This should be something like this, right? Localhost. Then we used the port 27017, which is the default one. Then we are going to use the database that we used before, which is MongoDB demo. So here we'll do something like this. Okay, so this is the first thing that we do. So in most cases, the thing that you would usually do is like always whenever you wanted to perform any operation to the database, you will do this specific set of procedures. First one, you are going to connect to database, then perform, let's say, to perform the desired operation. Then you would go with close database connection. These are the steps that you would usually take to perform most of the CRUD operations. So in other words, CRUD usually it stands for, so let's say CRUD here stands for create, read, and update, and delete. So let's first initialize a connection to the database. We can do something like, let's go with MongoDB client dot connect, as you can see here. And from this connection, we are going to pass two stuff. So the first one is where your database URL, where is it is located, right? So this is completely fine way to do it if you want to do it this way, or you can, if you choose to go with the local installation for your MongoDB, then you will have to use safer connection in this case to make like a hookup or a socket connection with your database. But for now, all we're gonna do is just like pass URL here, and then we will pass an arrow function as a callback. So the callback here, we should expect, let's say, operation error. You can just call it anything, but for me, I like to call it this way to be able for the students to just like follow the whole thing. So here, let's go with DB handler. Since with this connection, if we are able to create a connection here, then we will use this DB handler to perform all the operations that we wanted to do, right? So in this case, I will just like do one thing. Let me try to increase the size settings here. I'm not sure, like text editor, font. Let me just try to add to 18, for example, right? I think it's gonna be easier for you guys to see it, right? So here, I will check if there is an error, let's say operation error, then console log an error has occurred during the connection process, for example, right? So if there is no error, what I should say, I would just like say console log, then connected to database, right? Then what you should do, let me copy just like these two lines here and let's sit next to each other. So here we open the connection. So the desired operation here is to create a connection. Then what we should do the closing to the database connection. So let's see how does it work without closing, right? So from here, let's go with node. What was the name of the file? It was CRUD. So here, as you can see, it's saying connect to the database. And as you can see, the cursor here is still waiting for your input. So the connection is not going to be closed. And this is going to be, let's say, even like a security threat to your service. Sometimes going to be just like exhaust all the computation power that you got. All right. So we have to close this connection, right? So here, to stop this one, you would click Control and C. Now, let's just like do db handler dot close. This should close the connection. So if we gonna try it again here, as you can see, it's already connected, and once it's closed the connection, then it's gonna just like get you back to the command line. So as you can see, there's a warning here, which is one of the functions that we are using, or the connection that we are using, is going to be duplicated soon, right? So what it's saying here is you should pass this object to your constructor. And here, when we say constructor here, we mean the connection constructor. So if we can do something like this, I think this should fix the problem, right? So let's see here. Yep. So the problem here has been fixed, right? So now let's try to do almost the same thing as what we did before. So the things that we done before was we fetched data, we inserted data, update, delete, all these kind of stuff, right? So let's start with here. Let's not close the connection for now. And let's do one thing here, which is the thing that I'm going to do. Let me just like try to insert a new record, right? So let's say let data equal to an object, right? And we said like it's always an object. So here I would say with, let's just like go back here to see what we got. So it's the ID and name, right? So here, if we're gonna go to the ID, let's just like give it 10, and the name, it should be add a new name from MongoDB native driver, right? So now what we should do is, as you can see right now, we are just connecting to the database. And to be able to perform any operation on collection, you have to define which collection you are trying to use, right? So what we should do here is we should do something like db handler, which is the variable that we passed here. Then I'm gonna go with db. If you remember, when you wanted to use a specific database, even though it's just like mentioned here, you will have to tell me like from here, which database are you going to perform this specific operation. So here I would go with this database name. Then from here, I can just like define which collection I'm gonna work on. And in this case, you can always do something like this and here, but for me, just like for simplicity, I'm gonna do something like this. So here in collections, I'm gonna go with the name of the collection that I'm using is names, right? So I would do here names. Oops. So I would do here names, and from here what I should do is just insert, and as you can see, there's insert mini and insert one. For now, I'm gonna just like focus on insert one because I just like wanted to enter one specific let's say record. So in here for insert one, Usually insert one is gonna accept two parameters. And to be able to work with most of these kind of stuff, you would usually go with, let's say here, if you're gonna go to Google and you would say MongoDB native driver, you would go with the documentation for this one, and you can go with any of these stuff, and from here you can just like do whatever you want. So I wanted to know or read about the collection and some of the API that MongoDB native driver are providing to me, right? So here, as you can see, these are the members here, and these are the type definitions. But my interest here is to read about these kind of operations. So I wanted to go with insert one, right? So insert one usually is going to be a document, which is the information or the document that I want to insert into our collection. And what kind of options do you have? These are the options that you wanted to pass. And what is the callback, right? So the callback is something that we perform once we are done with the operation of inserting here. So what I want to do is just, I'm going to pass data here. I'm not going to pass any options for now. You can go through the documentation and pick which option you should use based on the application that you are building. But for here, I'm going to just like pass. So this one should be it. So here, I want to say, let's say, the error that I would expect, let's say, operation. Let's say, just call it error. And let's say here, results. For now, let's just like use these two. And here we can do, or we can check if there is an error. So in this case, let's say if of error, then what we should do console log enable to insert data into your collection, right? Else, what I should do here in this case, I would say console log, then insert successfully, right? And from here, let's just like do a close in here. So this is just like really important. If you have this one or this line here as it is, it's going to be performed before you perform this operation here, right? So let's just give it a try to get you like what kind of problem are you going to face. Enable to insert data into your collection, right? So here, since there's an error with the kind of data that you got there, so let's say here as you can see, there's insert successfully. So the problem is here at this point, you will send a request to your database server, right? And once you receive a response from your server, by the time that you receive this response, the connection by itself is going to be closed if you have it as what we saw before. That's why usually whenever to overcome this problem, you might do something like either to put it here, or you can do something like set timeout. Then you will pass a function after, like, let's say 5, 6, 10 seconds. It depends on the size. But since this one is not scalable, so I would like to go with just like have the data or the clause after I finish the first operation that I wanted to create, or after I finish the operation. So just make sure that the closing to the database would be done within the callback here, or else the connection will be closed before you receive a response, or even before performing the the operation that you wanted to create. Okay, so the other operation that we just like learned before is how to fetch all the data. In other words, so let's say here, this is just insert operation, right? And here, let's say that we wanted to perform list operation, because most of the time the query that we create on our database, it's either list or fetch one specific document, right? So for now, let's just give it a try to see how to retrieve the whole database that we got, right? So let me here to try to save some time. You know what, let me just like write it for now. Later we're gonna do it. So here I will do the connection here. It's gonna be the same thing. You can always assign it to one specific variable, then you can just like use that variable, but here to make it easier for you to see how it's connected. So here find, and as you can see there, like the native driver provide you with a list of operations. So you can just like find, or you can just like find one specific, and this usually would be used to read one specific document based on the criteria that you are passing. Here it's gonna do find and delete, find and replace, find and update, which is all some of the operations that you would usually go with. If you want to read more about it, then you can go to the documentation that I told you before to make it to work. So according to their documentation, find, it's gonna like bring you a list of all the let's say the data or the document that you got. So it might take some time. So in this case, we added to array for one specific reason. So we know that pipelining or the chain here, this operation will not be performed unless you receive all or you finish the previous task. So in this case, you will fetch all the data, no matter how much time it takes, then you will pass it to array. And from to array, you will do your work, or you will iterate through the results that you got. So here, let me do up error, and here, let's say operation results, and in here, let's go with doing what we should do. So here, what we should do is just like to check if operation error, right? So here we go with console.log, just show the error that we got, right? Else, what we should do in this case, we should iterate, because now all the content, or let's say all the documents here that we got. So by the way, we can just like always, we're gonna use this one to refresh to make sure that we have everything here, right? So here, what we should do, by using find, as we learned before in the first demo, it's gonna return all the documents that you got, right? So you have to iterate through the whole list here to make sure everything is showing, right? So what I would do, I would go with for var I equals 0, and then I less than of results dot length. Then here I would say I would go with I plus plus. Then all I will do here is just try to console log So it depends on the operation that you want it to perform, but it's always something like this. For me right now, all I want to do is just print here the results, right? So this is just like the things that I want to do. And here, do not forget to make sure that you haven't closed the connection yet, right? So here, once it's done, I can just like close the connection. So here, let's go now to see. As you can see, these are the data that we got in our database. We have this one, 1, 2, 3, and 4. As you can see, we always can have these data. So this one from the previous operation or from previous run, and this is just like a new run, right? Because here we haven't commented out this data here, right? So we can just like, since it's already done, we don't want it to insert a new, let's say, document with every run that we're gonna go through, right? So now we think we are good at this place. So what we should do now, let's try to just fetch one item, right? So one item, it's almost gonna be almost the same thing, but instead of just like using find, I will use another one, which is going to be find one. And for find one, you would usually pass two parameters, if you recall. So the first one, which is going to be the criteria that you wanted to look for, and the other one usually is going to be just the callback. So the callback here is just like the operation error, and I would go with results. So the operation here is, or the criteria here that you wanted to pass is something like this. So let's go with ID 1, right? And as we said before, you can always use the same thing that what we used, like the operators, greater than or equal. Everything that we used from the previous demo, you can just perform it here in some way or another, right? So what we should do here is something really simple here. So now what we are trying to do is we are going to go to the database and find the document that has the ID of number 1. So here we can do something like F, then here of error, when console log, then of error, else all we have to do is just like console log of results, right? So because this is just, it's gonna be just like one document we got. So here I will just like comment out all these, and let's, once it's done, then we can just like see. So here, as you can see, this is just the like one document here, right? So now we've been able to create insert, we've been able to create a list operation, and here we've been able to just do fetch operation. So now let's go and try to do another operation, which is gonna be update operation. So let's go with update operation. So let me just like to save some time. Let me do one thing here. So most of the time we will find that insert operation usually would follow the same thing as update and delete, right? So let me just like do copy and paste for this. And here for the update operation, you would usually use update. As you can see, there's update 1, update mini, update, just like without anything. So most of the time, if you see like update by itself, you almost can pass the same thing at what you did there, and just like the command line of MongoDB. But for us, we are going to just like be more like, let's say, more easier for us to understand. So for me, I'm gonna go with update 1. So for the function of update 1, you would usually have, let's say, you are going to have the first parameter is the data that, or let's say the criteria that you wanted to do, and the other thing is the new data that you wanted to update. So let's go with let a new data here, and let's just like copy data here, and if you recall, this is just like the operation. And if you remember, like from the first demo, the insert usually we will use atomic operator, which was something like this, right? Set, then we will have this object. So most of the time, most beginners will have a problem trying to, or let's say, try to figure out what's going on, why it's not updating, right? So here, this is just like the new data. So here, it's gonna be first, I'm gonna pass the, let's say, the parameter that we wanted to look for. So here, we are going to try to update the first object, which has the ID of 1, right? So here, ID is 1, and I'm going to pass the new data here. And here, let's just like create 11 instead of just like 1. And here, updated successfully, right? So here, I don't need to go with the fetch operation anymore because we already done it and tested. So now, let's just like test whether the update functionality is gonna work or not. As you can see, updated successfully. So if you go here and you do a refresh, as you can see, it has been updated, right? So now we are done with this operation. So the last operation is going to be a delete. As I said, delete, update, and insert, like almost the same way. So here, what I would do is just say delete operation, and here I would go with delete. And in delete, you will always find either to do a bulk delete, which is delete many, or you may just like do delete 1, right? So for deletion here, all you have to go with is just the criteria and the callback here, right? So here I'm going to just like do 11, and here I would go with deleted successfully. Other than that, there's nothing. So here, if you want to, can just say enable to delete data into here from your collection, and you should be good to delete it. So delete it successfully here, and if you go back here, you won't find it, it's already deleted. And one thing here which is like really important for you, you can always you can inspect what kind of results or what kinds of response coming from your server. If you want to do that, then you can just like do a console log for our results, right? So you can always do something like console log, then op result, And if you run it here, you can see these are everything have you received. If you wanted to use any of this data, then you will be able to just like go through the object, right? So this is just like one thing. So another thing which is really important for you to get it is to understand like how to deal with bulk data. So we know that there's insert many, we know that there's update many, and we know that there is delete many. So if you understand one of them, you should be able to just like work with any other, right? So here, let's just like try to do bulk delete, right? So here, instead of just delete, I will use delete many. And since I already have like 2 documents here with the same ID, I would pick number 10 instead of, and then I can go and test it to make sure it's working fine. Did it successfully. If you go here and refresh, you can see you have been deleted like more than 1 document, right? And you will almost do almost the same thing as delete many. If you want to go with insert many, you will have an array of, or let's say a list of objects. Each object is just a 1 document. So we can say in another word, it's a list of documents, right? And if you want to update, you will almost do the same thing. Most of the time, update mini is useful when you wanted to update just like 1 field for all the documents that you got. So let's say if you wanted to have, let's say release year, for example, and you just like change, instead of just like starting with day, month, year, you want to have it as month, day, year. So you will update the whole database instead of just like take it 1 by 1. It's gonna be more efficient and easier for you to implement.